every week we put your questions to the doctors and hopefully get some answers.
Hi, Steve.
Mate, there are some great questions this week. I could have asked half of these myself. Right. I recently gave up smoking. Will the damage I have done over 10 years eventually recover? Can my lungs self-repair, says David?
Well, David, first of all, well done.
Yes.
It's a really big deal giving up smoking. I must admit, I used to smoke myself. Not proud of it, especially as a doctor, but I did. So well done. It can be really hard, and stick with it, okay? So 10 years. Thankfully, in the grand scheme of things, 10 years isn't a huge amount of time to have been smoking. So you should be able to get a good amount of repair, okay? So it goes through phases. One of the things that smoking does is all the tiny little hairs that line your airways essentially get burnt off and damaged by smoking. So one of the first things to start coming back is those hairs. And what those hairs do is they're designed to waft all the rubbish up out of your lungs, and you'll actually sometimes get a bit more of a cough as those start to kick in and they start to clear all the gunk that's accumulated down there over the years of smoking, as that kind of wafts back up. So first of all, you know, it is normal to expect a little bit more of a cough when you're recovering, well, when you stop smoking, okay? But really, in terms of 10 years, you should be starting to see really good recovery. And they say that if there's a famous statistic somewhere that if you stop smoking by the age of 30, thankfully, you know, it really doesn't have that much influence on your mortality from smoking. Now that really doesn't say that you should smoke up to the age of 30 and just give up. So I'm really not saying that, but it's saying that actually you have a good scope for recovery. So over 10 years, you hopefully haven't done enough damage to cause yourself significant changes to the structure of your lungs, things like COPD and causing fibrosis within the lung tissue itself. So hopefully that's not established. So hopefully you should be able to, over the years, go back to normal lung function. But well done.
Well done indeed. And what's an interesting thing is you've said there that you've stopped smoking, and a lot of people say, "Oh, I've given up smoking." But what I like to say is, no, you haven't given up. You've escaped. Yeah, because smoking. Again, you know, I was silly. I smoked for a while as well. But if you think you've given up something, then there's always that temptation to go back. But if you think you've escaped something and escaped, you know, the big cigarette companies, that, you know, the Philip Morrises and so on and so forth, putting all those chemicals in to get us addicted in the first place. So if you see something as escaping from it, then you never really want to go back. And I say it's kind of the same as well with carbohydrates. You know, once you realise that it's carbs that put on the weight, and you're trying to keep your weight off. I don't say, "Oh, I've given up bread." I've escaped that sort of that trap and escaped the Coca-Cola trap and so on. And my tip always, because I used to run a lot of courses about how to stop smoking, and all the companies I've ever run, I always used to run courses. And one I always said, the first thing is, you haven't escaped, so you haven't given up, you've escaped, but also there's no such thing as one, and that's always the thing, isn't it? You know, don't ever think I can just have one, because they are so, you know, I always say it's never your own fault if you smoke. It's never your fault. It's that, you know, something happened, you had one, and then you thought, "Oh, that's so horrible, I couldn't get addicted to that," and then before you know it, you become addicted. So they are manufactured for addiction, and there's no such thing as one. So just keep remembering you've escaped, but never try and have that one. So I've got a question then, because I wrote in the book, this is a really interesting thing, that, you know, like our skin replaces itself every 4 weeks or so, and, you know, most things apart from our teeth and our eyes replace. So the lungs do replace over a certain period. I can't remember now whether it's 7 years or 10 years. So why is it then that we can't say for sure that after a long period that you've, in other words, if the lungs self-repair or self-replace over, say, 10, 15 years, whatever the number is, how is it that is it the fact that because they've become damaged, even if they are replaced, you could be building on a rocky foundation? Or
so there's different types of damage within the body, and particularly in the longer term, you start to get structural changes within the air spaces within the lungs, and actually what were once small pockets become much larger pockets. They become much thicker, and think about maybe when you've injured yourself and you've got a cut and you've got a scab there, and you know that scab might persist for a long time, perhaps even life, and actually become very, very fibrous and tough. And that's what severe damage to the lungs does. And certain types of damage don't repair themselves as well as other types of damage. And so in chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, which is a very common disease of smokers, you don't get that healing to the same extent. It's still, in those people who've got that, it's still massively beneficial to stop smoking, because you stop the progression of the disease, or you at least significantly slow the progression of the disease down at that point, But if you keep smoking, it continues to get worse. So, there is always a reason to stop smoking.
So we're going to assume that because you've been smoking for 10 years that you probably are, in your 20s or your 30s. Could be a wrong assumption. So great news. What you start off by saying that if someone stops early enough, then you can expect full recovery. But even if you stopped in the later years, it's still the best thing to do.
Absolutely.
Is stop, and everything. Eventually, most things. You're increasing your longevity all the time, hopefully, by just stopping.
I do want to say a little bit about relapsing now, Relapsing and starting smoking again, it's part of the cycle of stopping. It's okay if you relapse. I mean, I don't want you to think, if you've relapsed and you start smoking again, that you'll never be able to give up, that you're, somehow weak in willpower. It does happen. So, and they say that the kind of average number of relapses and then before you actually eventually stop is 6. So the average number of times toing and froing off the cigarettes. So just if you do find yourself, going back onto the smoking, don't think it's just forever. It's okay to relapse. If that happens, it happens. Keep moving forward.
There's a lot of help out there as well, isn't there? There's a great book by an author called Alan Carr, who brilliant course, and they actually do some physical courses as well. But just do some research and try and get some help. I think that's the key thing as well.
And most practices have a stop smoking nurse, or your GP practice will be able to tell you where to access that service, and you're far more likely to be able to give up smoking. We know that with support you're more likely. You've got that accountability, and we talk about accountability with exercise and all sorts of other things to help push you through. And it can just be a case of having someone outside of your own family, outside of your friendship circle, saying, look, let's give you a stop date, and we're going to stick to this stop date, and we're going to support you, and we're going to help you, and we're going to see you on a regular basis, and it works.
And it's never too late as well. Ian, who runs our warehouse with his wife Lynn, he is late 50s and just finally gave up earlier this year, and he's been off it now for about 9 months. So it's never too late to stop, and it is possible, although we admit it can be difficult, but just don't give up. That's the key thing. Don't give up giving up.
When you were researching your book, Steve, what did you find out about, in terms of smoking, what did you find out about the kind of addictiveness of smoking? Because I've always thought that this really interesting thing is one of the reasons we find giving up so difficult because we're told that it's difficult to give up.
I mean, I've never thought about it like that. It could be that, but there's no doubt about it, whether it be cigarettes, alcohol, carbohydrates, Coca-Cola, whether it be shampoos, toothpaste, these are all produced by massive conglomerates who have whole departments to engineer their goods for addiction. Because you can't sell a toothpaste or a shampoo just once and make money on it. So these companies spend billions and gazillions on their advertising, and they rely on people buying their product time and time and time again. So they have whole departments there to create addiction. So we do get addicted to, they're engineered for that purpose. But you're right, part of one of the things of being addicted could be we're told it is hard to kick at addiction. So It's not an exact science, otherwise it'd be dead easy to stop. And smoking's, like I say, I used to smoke. You've admitted to smoking as well yourself in the past. That it's just doctors. I mean, you're a doctor, but I tell you what, the place I see more people smoking is doctors and outside hospitals. I was visiting a friend a few weeks ago in hospital. I saw so many doctors outside smoking. They all know it's a killer and dangerous and deadly.
Yeah, absolutely.
So look, these things are addictive. It is difficult to stop, but it is just change. I always say, sometimes you might have to change your circle of friends. If they're all smokers, it's hard to give up when everybody else is still doing it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I find it easier. I still like my few glasses of red wine at night. I find it so much easier. My wife and I have had 5 kids together to hardly drink anything in that 7 or 8 months of pregnancy that I do now, because wifey's having a glass of wine most nights and I'll have a glass of wine most nights. So it's your circle of friends. You may have to think about how often you go out when you're trying, certainly in that period of giving up. But as you know, I own a restaurant, and I tell you, one of the best things that's ever happened is that as a restaurant owner and a bar owner, we were absolutely paranoid when they put the smoking ban in pubs. We thought that was going to be the end of the pub and everything. But it's one of the best things ever, because we still got the same clientele. And for a few years, a lot would go outside and smoke. But now, a lot of those people have given up just because the environment's changed, and no longer you smoke. When everybody's smoking in the pubs, everybody smokes in the pubs, and no longer anybody does that. So
it was certainly a big worry for a lot of businesses and stuff, and certainly has had a big impact on the pub trade and stuff. But I remember having my wife's a singer, and actually it's great that she doesn't have to work in a smoky environment anymore, like I used to before. When I was. My prior career was as a DJ, so I've certainly spent a lot of time in smoke-filled nightclubs.
There can't be many DJs that end up afterwards becoming a doctor. That's absolutely fantastic. Dr. DJ, we're going to call you from now on. Excellent. Right, let's move on. A great question, David, and it's a very tough one to answer, but just seek as much support and help as you can. But you've already made up that move. That's brilliant. Right, Barbara wants to know. I find it hard to motivate myself to get out of bed and go for a jog or even a walk in the mornings, says Barbara.
Right.
I find it hard to motivate myself to get out of bed and go for a jog or even a walk in the mornings.
Okay, I think there's a few layers to this, actually. So. We can talk about so many things. I think it's pretty normal to not feel overly motivated to be wanting to go out and do exercise, particularly as we're approaching the colder months of the year. It's it can seemingly take ages just to get enough clothes on, just to be able to go out and walk the dog sometimes. But I want to just dig a layer deeper, and there's a difference between not wanting to go out because you're all warm and you're snuggled up in your bed, and it's not very nice to get out of bed and having to go and do something, to just not wanting to get out of bed in the mornings. Okay, so one of the things I would say is, if this has been a recent change or something that's been gradually getting worse, then could there be something going on with your mood, and is that something you need to be seeking some help from your doctor about? So if that is, we know that you're not having the energy to get out of bed, or sleep disturbances can be a sign of depression. So, if that's something that's going on, I do urge you to go and seek some help from that. The other thing is sleep. Are you getting a good night's sleep? So it's certainly a lot easier to want to get up and out of bed in the morning, if you are well rested, of course. So you naturally need enough sleep. If you're not sleeping very well, or for not long enough, then of course you're not going to want to get out of bed in the morning. So are you getting enough sleep?
And there's an interesting one, isn't there, in that for the last 30-40 years, every book, every magazine is, exercise is the most important thing of all. But it's kind of a little bit wrong, really, in the sense that a good night's sleep is one of the most important things you can have. And I used to be one of those that used to get up at like 5 o'clock to go for a jog, completely compromise my sleep, thinking the exercise was more important than sleep. I think through all my research now, the first thing is get a good night's sleep first, wake up revitalised, and then go and do some exercise. And if you've had a good night's sleep, then the exercise becomes much easier. And then I read something that was the best advice I've ever been told, and I think it's great advice for everybody. If you've had enough sleep and you wake up and you go, shall I or shan't I do that exercise? Whether it be a walk, or you've said a jog, a walk or a jog, or go in the gym, shall I, shan't I, you're umming and ahhing, always ask yourself the question after you've done the exercise, not before.
That is a great.
Yeah, because the answer is nearly always yes. You very rarely regret going out and doing a long walk, or walking the dog, or some sprinting, or some weights, or even though we don't completely endorse long jogging, still that 5k and or below is good for the soul and everything. Don't debate it before, shall I, shan't I. Just go and do it, and then debate it afterwards. And you always go, yeah, it was the right thing.
Yeah, so I think there's, obviously, so sleep is one thing. Another thing we can have a think about is what's going to motivate you to go out and do that exercise. Okay, what kind of commitment can you make either to somebody else or to someone outside your friendship circle, a friend, a family member, that's going to mean that you feel bad about cancelling that. Okay, so this can be different things. I've got a friend I go running with on Saturday mornings very often, and I feel bad if I was going to cancel on my friend Tom, because that's what we do. We go running on Saturday mornings, and the other thing is, are you going to feel bad if you cancel, if you book a session at a gym, or or a class, or a yoga class, or a Pilates class, or whatever class, whether that's a group class at your local village hall or town hall, or a personal trainer. What is going to be difficult for you to say, I'm not going to go and do that. Okay, so whatever it is that keeps you accountable, keep you accountable. Okay. But if it's just trying to go out and do a bit of walking, setting yourself really small goals, okay? You can just do a little bit and then keep it going day after day. There's a comedian, is it Steve Martin?
Right, yeah. Brilliant.
I think it was him. I might be completely misquoting here, but
he won't mind. He's not watching. It's fine.
He was asked. I think, how does he keep writing jokes? How does he keep being so funny, basically? He just said, I write jokes every day. And what he does is he marks it on a cross, on a calendar, on a wall. He said, and after a few days of writing one joke a day, you see a chain starting to form, okay? And then all you've got to do is not break the chain, okay?
Interesting.
So basically, he just did this every day, and eventually you get to a point where you don't want to break the chain, and you can do that with exercise as well. So even if it's just getting yourself out the door and going for a 5-minute walk around the block, it's better than doing nothing. And you just start to build that up over time, and then just don't break the chain.
Don't break the chain. It's exactly what we do with the app. So with the Primal Cure app, if you haven't got the Primal Cure app yet, go download it. You can download it from the Play Store or the Apple Store. And the app, you have to, ideally, there's a maximum score of 10 points, but you can't get to 10 unless you do some exercise. So you can get to 9 without exercise by eating right, and you put all your scores in about what you've eaten, etc., etc., etc. But you can't get to the perfect 10 without some exercise. And you might be happy scoring 8s and 9s every day. You can get the average throughout the month, but you need to do some exercise to get to 10. And a 20-minute walk, for example, will get you a point. An hour walk will get you 3 points. So to get to that perfect 10, you need to do something. And that's when we check. If you've been using the app for a long time, you'll know we changed the scoring system a few months back. The whole reason was that we said, right, the maximum score you can score is 10 anyway. If you're doing everything primally, you've still got to do some exercise or get you to 10. Or maybe that day you're a little bit unprimal, maybe use some shampoo that got chemicals in, and it measures all these sorts of things. Or maybe you didn't get the diet completely right. Then you can make up for it with exercise, but it's living primarily, mainly diet first, exercise second. Most important to get your sleep and all these things right, but exactly the same as your Steve Martin story, in that you're accountable. I'm accountable to my app. So I'm trying to get as many days close to 10 as possible, which encourages me to get up and go walking. But I'm going to come back to your question, Barbara, which is hard to motivate myself to get out of bed. Try and get that good night's sleep first. So if you think you've got to go walking, you would like to go walking the next morning, just go to bed a bit earlier, so you're not dragging yourself out. Because if you are dragging yourself out, or finding it hard to motivate yourself, it may be that you're just not getting enough sleep. And don't compromise on the sleep. Maybe then go for a walk after work, or lunchtime, or if you've got an hour at lunch, just even going out for a walk around the block where you work. Richard Branson, for example, nearly all of his meetings, not all of them, but nearly all his meetings are walking meetings. So he'll always go for a walk where he can, because you're trying two things in at the same time.
I love making phone calls when I'm out walking the dogs. Sometimes when there's a bit of a dog social life activity going on, you have to apologise to the person on the phone. But that's a really good way to get some calls done. I'm going to tie in a little bit of research that came out of the States in the last week, okay? It's published in the British Medical Journal, very prestigious journal. So it was done, and it ties back to energy levels, okay, and diet. And one of the things we've often been doubting here at Primal Cure is, does calories in equals calories out? Do you have to balance that? And it's something that we've been told for a long, long time, that we should balance calories in, calories out, and that is the key to maintaining a healthy weight. But this study was done with a group of overweight individuals, and they randomized them to eat, they managed to get them to eat a certain prescribed diet for a full academic year. It was a university-based thing. And one of them was a typical low-fat, high-carb diet. The second one was somewhere in the middle, and the third was a low-carb, high-fat diet. And what they actually found was a discrepancy of several hundred calories of energy between the high-carb group and the low-carb group. And actually, so there seems to be some sort of metabolic advantage from this study that being on a low-carb diet confers to you. Okay, so this came from, I really do sympathise with what Barbara is saying here. And I remember when I struggled with that energy first thing in the morning. But is that energy to do with a high-carb diet essentially locking that away, sucking that energy away from you? And actually, I know now, having been on a low-carb diet nearly 3 years, that I've got so much more energy now. And that study explains it. And actually, maybe one of the first things to do is to start cutting the sugar out, start reducing those carbohydrates, and maybe that's going to be able to allow you to have more energy.
No, you're absolutely right. I'm exactly the same. I was overweight and doing my jogging and all the exercise I thought I should be doing, but I was always struggling for energy. And then it's a downward spiral, because you were taught back then, because you always hear carb loading, fast before you go walking, all that. So it's like a downward spiral. But once you come off the carb loading and realise another energy source is quality fats, then it could be that. So Barbara, maybe one of the first things to do is read your Primal book. Cut down the carbohydrates, increase the quality fats, and getting the right amount of protein, and you might find that alone gives you plenty more energy. So Barbara, thank you for what was a wonderful question.
Good question,
Right, Nigel's question, and at first I thought I had one answer to this one, but I'm going to see what you say, because actually I'm having second thoughts about this. Can taking probiotics prevent septicemia? And I suppose the first thing we should do is explain what septicemia is for those who might not know. This comes from Nigel.
Okay, Nigel. No, I think this is a really good question, actually. So septicemia, let's define that first. Septicemia is commonly known as blood poisoning. You may have heard there's been a really big push from the side of a lot of ambulances all about sepsis, okay? And sepsis is the body's response to septicemia. It's a severe infection. We're not supposed to have bacteria in our blood. It's supposed to be, without bacteria in it. If you've got bacteria in your blood, you're going to be spiking high temperatures usually. Sometimes, if it's a really severe infection, your temperature can go low. Things like your pulse rate goes up, your breathing rate goes up, you feel completely shattered, and there's a range of other different symptoms that are kind of defining of sepsis or make us highly suspicious that somebody's got sepsis, and it is emergency stuff. Sometimes I do a lot of out of hours GP work, and I visit a lot of people in their own homes, and sometimes it feels like 999 is the last number dialed on my phone because it's a 999 emergency, okay? So there's a really good website called the Sepsis Trust, which gives some great information for people. It's both for medical professionals and for lay people as well, in order to learn more about sepsis. So if that's something that's of interest to you, then have a look at the Sepsis Trust website. Okay, so that's what septicemia is.
And isn't it interesting then? So we know that we're 10% human, 90% bacteria. the body has grown or adapted or has developed to have it all over our skin, to have bacteria in our guts, and more bacteria in our gut than the weight of our brain when you have it all together. But one place it shouldn't be is in the bloodstream.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And if it is, it's usually because it's got in there from somewhere else. So you've got a urinary tract infection or a lung infection or an ear infection even, or a skin infection where, it's overwhelmed those tissues and it's spread into the body.
Yep.
Okay, and it's a much more severe infection than when it's contained within an organ itself.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
So that's what it is. So back to the question, can taking probiotics prevent septicemia? So I guess you're never going to know when you're going to get it.
No.
So,
but I think what it links in with nicely is this, what you were talking about the microbiome. Yeah. So the microbiome, particularly the gut microbiome, we've seen so many studies done in the last 15 years about the microbiome, and they're just becoming more and more frequent within the medical press, which is a really, really exciting area because it's one of these things where we're still learning so much about it.
Yes, sure.
And not only are we learning about the microbiome, we're learning about how that interacts with our own genetics, how it pretty much interacts with every cell in the body. I never learned any of this stuff at medical school, Steve.
Yeah.
This has all come since I finished medical school. And they did say on the first day of medical school, probably 50% of what you have learned at medical school will be out of date by the time you finish medical school. We just don't know which 50%. So they can't tell you at that time. So we're always learning, and the microbiome and how that interacts with our genetics, how that interacts with and changes the way our genetics work based on your microbiome. It's very exciting. It's an incredibly complicated science. But one of the things I have been reading about more recently is how having a good microbiome affects your immune system. Okay, and this may link in with septicemia. Ultimately, I don't know. I think the answer to that question is, can taking probiotics prevent septicemia? I don't know. Maybe not. But actually, we certainly know that maintaining a good gut microbiome is good for your immune system, okay? And in disorders like type 2 diabetes, where things become you're metabolically dysfunctional, you've got a problem with your metabolism, we know you're less likely to have a good immune system there.
That's a really good point.
Yeah. And we often say that people with type 2 diabetes are more prone to infections, and that's certainly true, and that may be because you've got higher blood glucose levels that's giving bacteria something more to grow in. Of course. You've got they've got to get their energy from somewhere, so having uncontrolled blood glucose levels may give those bacteria extra energy sources. But could it also be to do with the fact that your microbiome may be in bad shape, and therefore your immune system may be in bad state, and you're actually more likely to get infections because of your microbiome not being up to where it should be? Whether probiotics can help that and influence immunity, who knows? It's possible.
It's kind of possible, but you could almost say, Nigel, great question, but the key thing is, because we're saying, can probiotics prevent septicemia? The question is more really, just get your health on track and do everything you can to defend against all types of illnesses. Dr. Shan said something really interesting the other day. He said, look, one of the questions we had the other day was, flus are going around the office, colds are going around the office, how long are people infectious when they've got a cold or a flu? And Shan said, okay, they can be infectious, but the best thing you can do is to build your own defence up. And he said, as a GP in the winter, every day we see cases of people with the cold and flu. He said, but for like 8 or 9 years, I haven't had it because I'm building my defences up, I'm getting my vitamins, my minerals, vitamin C, and so on and so forth. The key thing is always do everything you can to build your defence up against everything. Yeah,
absolutely. I wish I could say I've been as lucky as Shan, but as you can probably hear from my voice a little bit at the moment, not quite being quite so lucky. But yes, I know, I completely agree with that. We can't just not go to work because we've got a cough and a cold, unfortunately. I mean, if every doctor who got a cough and a cold, was off, it'd be even harder to get GP appointments.
So great question, Nigel, and a tricky one to answer, but hopefully you're happy with what we came up with there. Trevor, if carbohydrates are bad, why do my grandchildren's school still promote a balanced diet? Trevor, I know exactly how you feel, because my daughter came home crying a couple of months ago. She took my book into school, and the teacher said, well, no, that's not right, you have to have a balanced diet. My daughter, being 13 and quite bright, actually defended our cause and said, look, if you know something's bad for you, why have loads and loads of carbohydrates? Surely the key thing, if we know proteins, is what repairs and rebuilds the body. If we know quality fats, and quality fats are healthy and help you, stop putting on weight. But the school said, no, a balanced diet is what we need, and they're just following government guidelines. But if carbohydrates are bad, why do my grandchildren still promote a balanced diet? Might be because they haven't caught up yet, or it might be that maybe they have to because that's government guidelines, or...
I think this actually could spark a very interesting debate. How long have we got?
Let's do...
This is a really good one, because should a low-carb diet be for everybody? Okay? And I think this is a really, really interesting question, because it's pretty clear that some people and some societies have survived and thrived on a high carbohydrate diet. We can look at a lot of Asia, where they've had a high white rice, so polished rice, so they've got rid of all the external fibre and stuff. They've lived lived with a high carb diet for many generations, and actually only until fairly recently in Chinese and Asian history have they had really high rates of type 2 diabetes. I mean, China leads the world in type 2 diabetes rates at the moment. It's crazy. We often think America, but actually it's India that's second in the world. Okay, but these are both high rice and especially in India, in certain parts of India, bread consuming countries.
Breads
Absolutely. So bread is very much a staple part of the diet over there. And actually, I do remember reading a recent study which has provided an association between high white rice consumption and type 2 diabetes. But it's a really interesting one, isn't it? Because
why is it only just started?
Started?
I've seen a massive shift in the 10 years I've been working in India, and I go, once every month, once every 2 months. The longest gap is 2 months. And now it's talked about more than it's talked about here. So many people that I know in India, in my offices and so on in the factories, have now got type 2. But why didn't that happen a couple of generations ago? So maybe it's a combination of the rice, and India a lot of bread as well, and something else coming together maybe.
And I think that something is sugar. Okay. So I think the key differentiating factor, there was a number of different things, of course, Steve. You look in China and in India, they've had a large shift in their populations from the fields the rural areas where they were having really active lives, right through into the cities where they're having much less active lives. That's true. However, you've seen a significant westernization of the diet. I think 20 years ago you couldn't get sugary drinks in China. Then actually what you've got is a body that's already on the limit of what you could take in terms of carbohydrate consumption, on the absolute limit, and then sugars just come in and tipped it over. Okay, so here's this question: Are we born carbohydrate insensitive? Okay, and I think some of us are, because we have a family history of type 2 diabetes, and maybe some of us have got a really just bad genetics from that point of view. But actually, I think for the majority of us, we're born fairly tolerant to carbohydrates, and it's just that actually, so should we be restricting carbohydrates to children? Should we be having a balanced diet as children? A balanced diet, whatever that's supposed to mean. Well, I certainly don't think we should be restricting fats, okay? There's never been any evidence for that. But children likely have a much higher tolerance to carbohydrates than people who are struggling with obesity, type 2 diabetes. And that's, we are resistant to the effects of insulin. So I think it's very, very interesting to say, well, do we need to be restricting carbohydrates that much with kids? Maybe not, but the thing I think is, with grains, where are we getting our nutrition from? And actually, grains, for all that we've had pushed at us to say you should have lots of whole grain and all that kind of stuff, grain just isn't that nutritious.
Yes.
It's just not that nutritious. Yes, you've got a bit of fibre, but with a lot of whole grain breads and things like that, that's, it's marketed as whole grain, but they've got rid of a lot of the whole grain in there. So what we're buying as whole grain may not even be whole grain. Yeah, there's going to be some B vitamins, but really about the most nutritious grain we've got is oats. You can get a reasonable amount of your body's iron needs from oats, but essentially, do we really need to be getting all our energy from this kind of food, grains and stuff? What are your thoughts?
Well, my thoughts completely. My thoughts are that the body has to eat what it's designed to eat. And I know evolution, well, my belief is evolution takes a long time. And, carbohydrates just weren't around, I think, when the body was, sort of first developed in the way it is today. So I think we've got to cut down the carbs now, and massively if you are already overweight. And it's a real difficult thing for the schools, right?
Yes.
Because carbohydrates overall are less expensive. And of course, if we're taking a sociable and responsible view of things, we can't all become meat eaters because the globe can't sustain 8 billion people all eating meat. So maybe if you took an individual responsibility and let's share the responsibility equal, then maybe a balanced diet's right. But if you're really looking after your health and the health of your kids, then really got to cut back on most of those carbs, especially empty carbs, like you just said. Bread, pasta, rice, they're not associated with good nutrition.
No.
So carbs through vegetables, knock yourself out, because there are carbs in your broccolis and your spinaches and whatever, they're still jam-packed full of nutrition and things that we know are good for the body. But certainly my kids, now I never stop them from having a pizza, because if occasionally that's what they want, because that's what the mate's having, great. But would I make bread a foundation of my kids' food? Absolutely not, because now we're trained. So back to the questions about school and why schools still promoting a balanced diet. Maybe they have to. Maybe for the sake of the planet and the globe, a balanced diet is what we have to promote. But I'm just telling you what I do with my own kids is I never stop them from having, like I say, a pizza. But is that part of the stable diet? Absolutely not, because it's just void of good nutrition.
Yeah, I think I look back to my own school days, and I was lucky enough to get school dinners and stuff at school, but it was carbs with a side of carbs and then carbs with dessert. It was I remember like ravioli with mashed potatoes and baked beans, and then like sticky toffee pudding, and like you're just in a coma by the afternoon. And if that's balanced diet, then that's a bit worrying, really. If schools are going to provide, and I don't know what Jamie Oliver's been up to with his school dinners thing, but if schools are going to provide a decent amount of protein that children need for growth, a decent amount of good fats that's not ridiculously high in, seed oils and things like that are hugely high in omega-6 and completely shift our balance to a state of inflammation in our very formative years. And we know that children need good amounts of omega-3 for brain health and brain growth. It's even associated, having a good amount of omega-3 is even associated with intelligence.
Agreed.
So, if we're actually getting that in schools, and maybe they're starting to choose nutritious, the more nutritious sources of carbohydrates, maybe that's really a balanced diet. But I'm not sure that actually is what we're getting sold as the idea of a balanced diet, really. I think it's pushing it way towards grains, which are very, they've got good amount of energy in them, but not a hell of a lot of nutrition.
Agreed.
And that's just not, to me, what a balanced diet should be. And balanced diet should be plenty of protein, enough protein, the right amount of protein, okay? Good amount of fats to keep us our energy, and then carbohydrates good for, if we're going to have them, from good nutritious sources of carbohydrates where we're getting lots of other good stuff. But really, vegetables, meats, cheeses, these kind of things really provide those by the bucket load.
Sure.
Loads of nutritious food. So really, where's the need?
Yeah, where's the need? And I think the other thing is, look, my kids are learning some things that they're using. I mean, I love the school system. It's absolutely fantastic. One of the best education systems in the world. But hey, we learn things like algebra and some of these fractions my kids are coming going with. I've been running my own businesses for years. I don't even understand it, and I've never needed it. But why aren't we teaching just why not just 3 or 4 hours across the whole year, understanding the basics of food, understanding how all food breaks down into your proteins, your carbohydrates, and your fats. We should be teaching our kids this, so then they can make their own mind up. And when that baked potato comes out and people say, well, that's the healthy option, well, who's it healthy for? And if you're slightly worried about your weight at all as a child, then it's understanding the basic facts of food. And so few people know it. It's all in the book. Make sure your kids read it. Even just the first couple of chapters about understanding food, understanding where good nutrition comes from, because it's the nutrition that tends to be, not only are carbs sort of empty and they pile on the way and it's carbs, it's the only thing that really drives insulin, and insulin is what stores carbohydrates and sugar as body fat. Not only that is the case, but it's also void of good nutrition. It's good nutrition that remakes all the body parts. You just made a great point, omega-3, crucial for the brain. So if your kids are studying, it's like picking the right foods. And sometimes even the right foods are the wrong foods at the wrong time. So for example, turkey's got so much goodness, but if you've got to be alert, it's full of tryptophan, and if you're trying to do an exam, maybe that's even good, it's good the rest of the time. But you need to understand what it is that at the right times. Turkey's great if you want to fall asleep. That's why we'll fall asleep, Christmas afternoon, because it's full of tryptophan. So anyway, I'm going to get off my high horse. Schools are still lecturing a balanced diet, and maybe for the sake of the planet, that's not a bad thing. But the sake of your own kids, teach them about the 3 macronutrients and let them then make their own choices. And I always say that eventually the consumer drives the reality. So if all kids are going into school asking for something other than carbohydrates, eventually the schools have to change.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for that, Trevor. We could have gone on for that one for hours, but we have to keep that one short.
Didn't even get into fizzy drinks.
We didn't even get into fizzy drinks. Just don't drink them, unless it's water. How do I stop my toenails from rotting, says Simon. And I could have asked that question so many times over the last 10 years. How do I stop my toenails from rotting?
Simon, I'm not sure what you mean by your toenails rotting.
Probably means fungi, maybe.
I think you probably are, but actually this comes back to us guessing, okay? And we shouldn't guess. So
okay, let's reword it for Simon. How do I get rid of fungi on my toenails?
Okay,
maybe?
fine. First of all, okay, you've got several different options really. It depends how extensive it is. If there are a few other conditions that actually, things like psoriasis can really affect the nails, and you can get really strange looking nails. So if you're in any doubt about the diagnosis, go and see your doctor, okay? And your pharmacist might be a good first place to go, because they might be able to give you some ideas about that. But one of the things we do to diagnose fungal nail infections is take a clipping. Okay? So it's really, really useful if you want to get a firm diagnosis of what it is you're dealing with, to take a clipping in with you, okay? And we can send that off to the lab, send it for fungal analysis, and find out whether there actually are fungus there. Because if it's not fungus, it could be something else, and we could be looking at something maybe like psoriasis, maybe other things. So this is why I said about what is rotting. Okay, what is rotting? Because we need to make sure we get the diagnosis right. Okay, so really bad ingrained fungal nail infection may need antifungal treatment. Now, antifungal treatment is nothing to be taken lightly. The drugs affect the liver, and we have to do liver tests before, during, and after treatment. And what we have to do is we have to treat for the entire duration of the nail growing out, which can be months and months and months. Typically 6 months isn't unreasonable for a big toenail to be completely growing out. But what we're trying to do is stop fungus growing in new nail tissue. We can't really get rid of it because it's got no blood supply out of the nail itself. Okay, so severe nail infections, you may need actual medical treatment, and that may need to be pretty toxic. It's not a great choice. Other choices are, things like what you've often said this about not wearing shoes or wearing open-toed shoes and letting the air breathe through. And so this comes back to the idea: why do we get fungal nails? Well, we get it because our feet are trapped inside shoes and they're not really designed to be. Okay, and these shoes often don't breathe properly. They often get very moist. And they're dark, and these are exactly the kind of places that funguses love to live. Hence, warm, dark places.
That's where mushrooms grow.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got very dark, warm places, which, and especially if you've got a set of work boots that you're wearing day after day after day, are you potentially getting them damp and they're not really drying out between shifts? Then you're on your feet all day. Security, very commonly, I see this with security people.
How do you combat that? Have several pairs?
Yeah, well, often they're boots that are like steel toe cap because they work in a certain environment. And it's a case of saying, look, I've got really bad fungal feet infections here. Athlete's foot. It doesn't have to be on the actual nail itself, but can be between the toes. What we commonly call athlete's foot. It's definitely a really good idea to be saying, look, can I get a second pair of shoes or boots to be wearing at least on an alternative basis, okay? And get, often the insoles are able to be removed. Be taking those out and making sure they thoroughly dry out between shifts. Obviously change your socks on a day-to-day basis, of course, but you'd be surprised how many people don't. And, and it's really, really important for foot health, okay? So one of the things we see is cracking of the feet between the toes.
Toes and the heels as well, is that a different thing?
Yeah, absolutely. We see cracking of, particularly between the toes, as a result of athlete's foot.
And that hurts. I've had that several times.
It hurts like hell. Yeah, it's horrible. But it also means that you've got a break in your skin. And your break in your skin is somewhere that bacteria can get through the defense layer that you have, and you've got a lot of bacteria as well as fungus is all over your feet, and it can track in, cause skin infections. I've seen people admitted to hospital and becoming very unwell with septicemia because of what started as athlete's foot.
Oh, gosh.
So,
So my mum was always right to take it serious because I was, it's my feet. Nobody ever sees it, don't worry, it's my feet. But
absolutely.
You're right, it could turn into all sorts of things if you're not careful.
Yeah, absolutely, and it does turn into all sorts of things. So one of the things we always look at, when I used to work in the hospitals, was, when somebody is admitted with a skin infection of their lower legs, have they got athlete's foot? Because if we don't treat the athlete's foot, then they're going to keep coming back in with these infections.
Right.
So, take foot health seriously. Consider it around the house and in areas where you're not going to get trampled on or you're not going to drop things on. Consider maybe going barefoot or wearing open-toed shoes and letting your feet breathe a bit.
Yeah. So again, even in the winter, get home. Maybe one of the first things: take your shoes off, take your socks off, let them get out in the air, let them dry. I do a lot of dinghy sailing, as you know, so I spend most of my summer in wet boots, and that was always the start of my problems. And then you then finish the sailing and you go to work the next week, straight on with socks, straight on with the shoes. And personally, the way I got around it in the end was exactly what you just said. Just wear sandals. Until my feet used to get cold in the winter, I'd wear sandals every day. I'd even present on TV, because you never see what we're wearing down there. I've presented on TV, and in fact they reckon that Trevor McDonald sits constantly behind his desk on the news with sandals on. Not today.
You wouldn't believe what he's wearing
down there. It's the middle of the winter, mate. But if this was like the middle of the summer, I'd be sitting here with sandals on right now, because you've got to get air to the feet. And think about where mushrooms grow. They grow in damp, dark and damp. So we put our socks on, put our shoes on, and if we're sweating a little bit, then open those toes and sandals up. But again, what I've just learned massively from you is that it is important. Looking after your feet is really important, especially as blokes. We seem to think, like, nobody sees it, it's all right, so my shoes doesn't matter. But
it's just a bit itchy, it doesn't matter.
Get away with that for a bit. But it could lead to other things. So take foot health seriously.
Definitely, and just alternate shoes. I've got my favourite shoes. I've definitely got the shoes that I've got these back today. They're they're very, very comfy. And you kind of just want to wear your favourite pair of shoes all the time, but make sure you have days between wearing so that they get to fully dry out.
And again, changing the socks frequently.
Of course, yeah.
What's your view? I've got my own opinion on talcum powder for feet. Good or bad? Because
honestly, I don't really have a well-formed view on that, if I'm honest, Steve. You essentially, it's kind of fallen out of vogue, hasn't it, a bit really. Talcum powder used to be a thing. It's not really a thing anymore. Certainly you can get talcum powders which are athlete's foot based, which I think if you are having problems is not a bad idea to be popping in your shoes, just to help them get dried out. But no, I don't really have a strong view either way.
Try and keep it off your lungs, that's the key thing.
Yes,
For years
absolutely.
I put it all over my kids, and then the more you learn, you go, hang on, if you breathe it in, it can, because it's
absolutely.
so fine. Try and keep it, be sensible with talcum powder. I wonder, I don't know, what about putting a Vaseline on? But I guess that's counterproductive,
I think you're probably trapping things in,
it in, aren't you?
Yeah.
So try and get the feet dry, and open toe as much as you can. But, and again, especially gents, and this has come from Simon, assuming Simon's a gent, if it looks bad, go and see a doctor. Our parents are probably right. Your feet should, just because we're hiding them in our shoes, if it's not right and it's looking a bit nasty, go and see a doctor. Or, I love your advice, and I've learned a lot the last couple of weeks. I'll ask the doctor. Go and see your pharmacy as a first place to start, because they straight away could probably recommend some sort of treatment. And
also, a lot of chiropodists. Now, chiropody isn't a service that is generally freely available on the NHS. So chiropody dealing with feet, very much like podiatrists are kind of more senior, they do a little bit more surgery than chiropodists do. But a lot of chiropodists, they're on every high street because they do a lot of work with people with diabetes. Often they'll give you a free consultation as your first point of call. So there's another place to be going to if you're worried about your feet, to be going for some advice.
That's a great idea. Right, the next question comes in from Julie. Right, I could have written this one myself actually, to promote my new book. I have read the book, either this one or the first one. I understand most of it. Oh, well, okay, well, it's better than none of it, I guess. But want to know, in the absence of recipes, can I follow a paleo cookbook? Well, before Dan dives in, we have got a cookbook coming soon, because in the first part I said we'll never do recipes, because if we teach you the basics, then you can work out how to cook your meals yourself. But we've had so many people saying, well, give us some tips and some helps and get us going. So we have got a cookbook coming out called Primal Gourmet. But can you follow a paleo cookbook? Well, we'll come to the doctor in a second. Yeah, you can. I think the primal way of living is less restrictive than paleo, because we like cheese, and there's several reasons why we like cheese. One is it's a great way of getting fermented food. Certain cheeses are really good for fermented food, and kefir and lots and dairy. Sometimes other types of dairy is good for bacteria and so on and so forth. But your opinion, because that's the doctors, not Steve. Opinions on paleo as a whole, I guess.
Okay, so paleo harks back to Paleolithic, which is kind of primal as well. So, I can see where there is a crossover, and there is a lot of crossover between the two. And it's, we hear these all these terms going around: primal, paleo, low carb, high fat, ketogenic, low carb,
caveman diet.
All sorts of things. There is loads and carb dodging. There is loads and loads.
And if you've not heard of carb dodging, it's coming up by an author very, 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 very soon.
So there's a lot of different things that it's very easy to get confused. And I think the key differences between primal and paleo. Dairy, as you've just alluded to. Okay, so basically what they've said is, caveman ancestors wouldn't have gone and milked a yak or something. We've only recently brought dairy into our food chain. Okay, that's true, but at some point in recent history, I'm not sure if you know the dates better than recent. I say recent, I mean in terms of human evolution. Recent, we have evolved the ability to digest lactose, okay, which has made us lactose tolerant into adulthood. Now, most animals are not lactose tolerant into adulthood. Most of them, you go through that weaning phase and they are then not able to tolerate their mother's milk, okay? But humans are different. At some point, we have evolved to be able to tolerate lactose. So, why would you get rid of dairy? It's really, really good source of fats and nutrients, really rich source of nutrients. So yeah, and yes, okay, some people are lactose intolerant still. It's not everybody that can tolerate lactose.
It's quite a high number, and in different countries in the world, lots and lots of people are lactose intolerant. So I kind of take milk separate to the rest of dairy, because as you process milk into cheeses and so on and so forth, you lose most of that lactose in the fermentation process anyway. So I sort of take milk and the rest of dairy products as two different categories. Lots more people they can tolerate milk, but actually, is it doing them any favours or not? So I always say try and cut back on the milk if you can, but don't disregard cheese, because we need to find, we don't eat nowhere near as much fermented food as we have done for, one of the first things before cans were available. People were storing things in jars and foods for hundreds and hundreds of years, and that's a great way of getting healthy bacteria into the system. Therefore, we need to do everything we can to get good bacteria in, and cheeses is a great way. So maybe we separate those in two. We're not anti-milk. If you're going to have milk, we always say whole milk.
I think the thing with it, there's no point in having what I call diet milk. I just don't get it. I just don't get it. Like the red lid skim milk, it just it tastes like water. And actually,
well, it kind of is just coloured water.
Exactly. So it doesn't do anything for your cup of tea for me anyway. So with regards to milk, we've got to remember that lactose is a sugar. Lactose essentially breaks just down to glucose, just like starch does. So having too much of that is just like having a load of a load of potatoes, basically.
So it breaks pints of milk. I think
we have to be very cautious. And actually, if we're carb counting and restricting our carbohydrates, as we do, then you have to include milk as part of your carbohydrate consumption. Whereas a lot of that has gone from cheeses, and that actually it's not. Some cheeses have pretty much no lactose. Some have only a very small amount. So, absolutely. This is why I don't necessarily agree with paleo. That actually, I think it's a really good source of nutrition, and why would you get rid of it? It's really tasty. I like cheese. I like cheese, and I'm not ashamed of it. So cheese is great. So second thing about paleo, fruits. Paleo, they do say a lot of fruits is fine, okay? But did we always eat quite as much fruit? Did a banana look like? Does a banana today have the same effect on our body as a banana 10,000 or 30,000 years ago? No, of course not. We've bred them to become far sweeter and far less rich in fibre. So yes, our primal ancestors probably did eat a lot more fruit as part of their diet when it was seasonal, if you like. But at the same time, we're not eating the same things as they did, because we've changed them. A banana, it's got so much more sugar in than a banana ever would have done, and it would have been accompanied by loads and loads of fibre, really, really filling, and it would have helped us, with our gut bacteria and all that good stuff that we talk about when we talk about the microbiome and all that kind of stuff. But so fruit, okay, and also nuts. They ate a lot of nuts. Paleo kind of pushes nuts a lot. Now, that's great if you can go and buy your nuts from a supermarket in packets and eat them by the handful, and that's what we do if we kind of follow that. But actually, is that really how our Paleolithic ancestors consumed nuts? Absolutely not. These nuts have been prepared commercially. It takes ages to open these shells. You need, but so you can't just binge on a load of nuts. And a lot of people, I don't know whether it's true to the origins of the paleo diet, but a lot of people who follow a paleo diet, they eat a lot of nuts, and actually maybe we didn't.
I'm going to call you to an end there, because we're coming towards the end of the show. What I'll say is, on the nuts, if you're going to buy nuts, buy them from the baking aisle They're a lot cheaper because there's no VAT on nuts. You can save 20% on cost straight away if they're in the baking oil, because anything that's an ingredient to go into something else, there's no VAT, but packaged nuts, there is VAT on there. But if they're packaged, we eat them way too much. I love nuts. They're absolutely part of my stable diet. They're full of good nutrition. Yeah. If we're trying to lose weight, it's one of the few things you do need to cut down on, because certainly the cashews and the peanuts are absolutely jam-packed full of energy. Thank you very much for today's show.